Something just came out that could have a much bigger impact on this season than most fans realize. At first, it looked like just another off-season update, the kind of news people scroll past without thinking twice. But the more details started coming out, the clearer it became that this could completely change the outlook for some of the biggest games on the schedule. And if you're a Vikings fan, this is the kind of development that immediately grabs your attention. Because we're not talking about a minor situation here. We're talking about something that could affect the entire balance of power in the division and potentially create a huge opportunity for Minnesota right out of the gate. The crazy part? Most people haven't connected all the dots yet. But once you hear what was revealed and what it could mean moving forward, you'll understand why so many fans are suddenly paying close attention to this story. Before we dive into all the details, make sure you hit that like button if you're excited for Vikings football, and drop a SKOL down in the comments if you believe this team is ready to make some noise this season. One comment from a family member may have just changed the entire outlook of the NFC North, and if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, this is the kind of development that immediately grabs your attention. What initially looked like a routine recovery timeline is now starting to look much more significant, and the implications could stretch far beyond just one player. The latest information surrounding Micah Parsons' ACL recovery suggests that the timeline many people were discussing may have been far too optimistic, and that could have a major impact on the balance of power inside the division. The conversation began when Terrence Parsons Jr., Micah Parsons' brother, publicly addressed speculation regarding the star defender's return. According to the information discussed, there had been an expectation that Parsons could begin the season on the physically unable to perform list and potentially return relatively early. However, Terrence pushed back on some of those assumptions and offered a much different perspective regarding the recovery process. His comments suggested that a Week 5 return was never considered realistic. He emphasized that whenever Micah eventually starts practicing, several weeks of preparation would still be necessary before a return to game action could be considered. Even more notably, he indicated that he does not expect Micah Parsons to return to the practice field until October. That statement immediately changes the conversation because it extends the timeline considerably beyond what many fans had been anticipating. For Vikings supporters, this isn't about celebrating injuries. Nobody wants to see elite players sidelined. But from a competitive standpoint, the reality is obvious. When a player of Micah Parsons' caliber is unavailable, it changes everything. Defensive coordinators have fewer options. Opposing quarterbacks become more comfortable. Pass rush production declines. Turnovers become harder to generate. The ripple effect impacts every level of a defense. The discussion highlighted just how dramatic that impact appeared to be. Following Parsons' injury, the team struggled significantly. The defense generated only a handful of sacks and takeaways during that stretch, while points allowed increased substantially. Those numbers reinforce what many around the league already believe. Parsons is not simply another starter. He is the centerpiece who elevates everyone around him. That is why this update matters so much to Minnesota. When Vikings fans look at the early portion of the schedule, they see opportunity. If Parsons is unavailable during the opening weeks, games that would normally be viewed as major challenges suddenly become much more manageable. Early season matchups can define an entire campaign. Teams either build momentum or spend months trying to recover from a slow start. The possibility that one of the division's most impactful defensive players could miss a significant portion of that stretch is impossible to ignore. What makes this even more fascinating is the contrast between the player and the numbers. Parsons' production throughout his career has been extraordinary. The sack totals discussed in the report paint the picture of a defender who has consistently delivered elite pressure from the moment he entered the league. Seasons with double-digit sacks have become the expectation rather than the exception. Few edge rushers in recent NFL history have started their careers with that level of consistency and disruption. That is why every additional week of recovery becomes important. If the timeline truly extends into October before practice even begins, then the conversation shifts from missing a few games to potentially missing a much larger portion of the season. Recovery is not simply about being medically cleared. It is about conditioning, timing, confidence, explosiveness, and football readiness. Returning from a major injury is a process, not a single date on a calendar. Meanwhile, another intriguing development emerged involving quarterback Mac Jones. According to the report discussed, Minnesota was believed to be a preferred destination for Jones outside of San Francisco. That revelation provides an interesting glimpse into how players around the league may view the Vikings organization. Think about the situation from a player's perspective. The Vikings offer a respected offensive system, elite receiving talent, a strong coaching staff, and an environment where quarterbacks can potentially revive or elevate their careers. It is not difficult to understand why Minnesota would appeal to a veteran signal caller searching for the right opportunity. However, the report also explained why a move never materialized. The financial and roster-building considerations reportedly made alternative options more practical. Rather than committing significant resources, the Vikings pursued a different path at the position, preserving flexibility while continuing to evaluate the long-term future of the quarterback room. And that brings us to one of the biggest storylines surrounding this franchise. Who will ultimately become the face of the position moving forward? The discussion raised questions about the futures of multiple quarterbacks and suggested that the answer may not become fully clear until well beyond the current season. What makes this so compelling is that the Vikings appear to be balancing present competitiveness with future development. Every decision now could shape what the organization looks like several years down the road. The Micah Parsons update may have grabbed the headlines, but the quarterback conversation is quietly becoming one of the most important long-term stories in Minnesota. And there is still another major NFL development involving Brendan Sorsby and the league's decision that could have implications for how teams evaluate quarterback talent moving forward. What do you think, Vikings fans? If Micah Parsons misses a significant portion of the season, how much does that improve Minnesota's chances in the NFC North? And who do you believe will ultimately be the Vikings' QB1 in the future? Leave your thoughts in the comments. The quarterback discussion becomes even more fascinating when you look at what this report revealed about Minnesota's thinking and the uncertainty that still surrounds the position. While the headlines may focus on who is currently in the room, the bigger question is, who will be leading this franchise when the Vikings are truly ready to make a championship push? And based on the conversation presented, there is no consensus answer right now. The report pointed out that Minnesota's quarterback situation remains one of the most difficult projections in the entire NFL. There are multiple possible outcomes, and each one carries significant implications for the future of the franchise. What makes it especially intriguing is that there appears to be genuine uncertainty about how the organization views the long-term hierarchy at the position. One possibility discussed was the eventual emergence of J.J. McCarthy as the long-term answer. Despite all the noise surrounding the position, there remains a belief that patience could ultimately pay off. The idea presented was that Minnesota may effectively be allowing McCarthy additional development time, giving him an opportunity to mature behind the scenes before eventually handing him the keys to the offense. That scenario would certainly fit a strategy focused on maximizing a young quarterback's growth. Rather than rushing a player into action before he is completely ready, the organization could benefit from allowing him to absorb the system, refine his mechanics, gain experience in meetings and practices, and prepare for a much larger role down the road. The fascinating part is that this approach would also create financial flexibility. A quarterback on a rookie contract provides a tremendous advantage in today's NFL. Teams can allocate resources elsewhere, strengthen the roster around him, and build a more complete championship contender. That possibility is undoubtedly part of the appeal when projecting McCarthy's future. At the same time, the report made it clear that nothing is guaranteed. The current quarterback landscape could look completely different a year from now. Performance changes perceptions quickly in the NFL. Players who appear locked into major roles today can find themselves fighting for opportunities tomorrow. That uncertainty is why the quarterback conversation remains one of the most closely watched storylines in Minnesota. Another interesting angle raised during the discussion involved Baker Mayfield. While no move is currently taking place, the report highlighted ongoing contract questions surrounding the veteran quarterback. The possibility was floated that if circumstances changed elsewhere and Minnesota still needed a long-term answer, Mayfield could theoretically become an option worth monitoring. The reasoning is understandable. Mayfield has demonstrated resilience throughout his career. He has battled through adversity, handled difficult situations, and continued producing despite dealing with injuries and constant scrutiny. Whether or not that scenario ever becomes realistic for Minnesota is impossible to know, but it illustrates just how many variables remain in play when discussing the future of the Vikings quarterback position. And then came another major NFL storyline that generated considerable debate: the situation involving former Cincinnati quarterback Brendan Sorsby. According to the report, the NFL declined to hold a supplemental draft, effectively preventing Sorsby from entering the league through that avenue and leaving the 2027 NFL Draft as the available path forward. The decision immediately sparked discussion across football circles. The report argued that the league was sending a strong message regarding gambling-related issues and emphasizing accountability. The view expressed was that allowing an immediate path into the NFL under those circumstances would create concerns about the standards being established for future players. As a result, the league's decision was presented as a reflection of its desire to maintain a firm position on those matters. From a Vikings perspective, however, the discussion suggested that Minnesota was unlikely to have been heavily involved regardless. The quarterback room is already one of the most talked-about groups in football. Adding another polarizing name to the mix would have created even more attention and even more speculation. In fact, one of the strongest points made throughout the report was that Minnesota has already experienced enough noise this offseason. Every conversation seems to return to quarterbacks. Every practice report generates debate. Every roster projection becomes a major topic among fans. Introducing another highly discussed quarterback prospect into that environment could have created even more distractions. And that leads to a larger observation that many Vikings fans may find interesting. Sometimes the most successful teams are not the loudest teams. The report argued that quieter off-seasons often lead to stronger regular seasons because organizations can focus on preparation rather than constant controversy. Whether that theory ultimately proves correct remains to be seen, but there is certainly logic behind the idea. Teams perform best when attention stays on football rather than endless external narratives. As we step back and look at everything discussed, one thing becomes clear. This has been a massive stretch of developments for Minnesota. The Micah Parsons recovery timeline may have created an unexpected opening in the NFC North race. The revelation that Mac Jones reportedly viewed Minnesota as a desirable destination reinforces the growing reputation of the Vikings organization. The ongoing uncertainty surrounding the future quarterback situation ensures that every game and every decision will be scrutinized moving forward. And the NFL's ruling regarding Brendan Sorsby adds yet another layer to an already fascinating offseason. What makes all of this so compelling is that none of these stories have reached their final chapter. Parsons still has a recovery process ahead of him. The Vikings' quarterback hierarchy remains unsettled. Future roster decisions are still coming. And as every Vikings fan knows, one development can completely reshape expectations overnight. That's why this upcoming season feels so important. Minnesota has opportunities in front of them. They have talent across the roster. They have significant questions that need answers. And they have a chance to prove that the momentum built during the offseason can translate into meaningful success once the games begin. Now I want to hear from every Vikings fan watching. Do you think the extended Micah Parsons timeline changes the NFC North race? Who do you believe should be the Vikings' long-term QB1? Is J.J. McCarthy ultimately the future? Or do you see another path emerging? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Smash that like button if you enjoyed the discussion. Subscribe for more Minnesota Vikings coverage and stay locked in because the biggest stories of this offseason are still unfolding. SKOL.